everybody. Welcome to Cloud Wars Live. We're digging into the digital revolution and the incredible impact it's having on our personal lives, our business lives, and anywhere in between, if there is anything other than our personal, our business lives. Really excited today to be speaking with Doug Kehring. He's the Executive Vice President of Corporate Operations at Oracle. Had a long history there. We're going to take a look through some of that career to see how that plays out, where Oracle's been, where it's headed, and what it's doing for its customers today. Doug, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks. Always great to be with you.
So, Doug, your career has been interesting, right? For 22 years, you started off on the M&A side of things, and what was it, 100 acquisitions in 8 years, NetSuite, PeopleSoft, some other big ones. What was it? What came up in the company or in your head that had you shift over into a different part of the business?
Yeah. So when I joined, obviously Oracle was largely an on-premise company and really just selling licensed software, and through the use of acquisitions, which as of today with the current pending acquisition of Cerner, we're looking at 150 acquisitions for well over $100 billion. So it's really helped transform the business, and in fact got us into new lines of things like the hardware business with Sun Microsystems. But it really, interestingly, it was fairly easy to integrate those acquisitions early on because despite going through technology transformation, the business model is always the same. That little thing called the cloud came along, and it really was the first time, certainly in Oracle's history, where we had such a disruptive business model, not just a technology model, where we were really moving from selling licenses in upfront type transactions to now selling services and delivering those as subscriptions over time. And it was interesting as we went through some of those early integrations of companies like Taleo and Right Now, and just the foreign nature by which that business model was affecting us, to the point where I called Safra Katz, our CEO, one day and just mentioned that it might be worthwhile for us to think about actually transforming all of Oracle to fit this new cloud model rather than trying to jam the round peg back into the square hole. And that really set off our own internal transformation efforts, which have been going on for several years now, as we've really learned to be a services-based company rather than a products-based company.
Well, Doug, that was that phone call. It sounds like the communication of a fairly simple idea, but that's pretty profound in its sweep, right? An organization as big as Oracle, complex with a number of products and people, 200 countries around the world. What was that like?
It was definitely a lot of culture shock that went through in those early phases of it. But I think for the most part, most of our employees here at Oracle understood and really embraced and leaned into it. So as we went through the transformation effort, we thought about it from the standpoint of saying, hey, if we started over, let's act like Oracle didn't exist today. How would we arrange our business model? What would we do to help serve customers? And that really became our North Star. We would dream up what that endpoint would be in mind, and then we really worked with the rest of our organization to figure out how to change, not only our culture, in terms of how our people approach things, but what were the business processes that needed to be put in place in order to drive this new effort, and then finally, what were the systems that would help power that? And as you can imagine, it happened to be the right time for that because Oracle itself had been busily not just acquiring some of the assets, but building a lot of the cloud technologies ourselves. So we really used that as the opportunity to become our own best reference customer, which was, as I went through the process of implementing all this transformation, we did it on the back of the Oracle Cloud Technologies. So not only helped accelerate our transformation, but actually allowed us to then really understand and be empathetic in the shoes of our customers, who themselves, regardless of what industry or what geography you're located in, we're all being disrupted in some way. We're all being pushed into this services-based economy type world, and so now all of a sudden we could bring our own learnings to bear and help customers understand how to transform themselves.
Doug, there was just a couple of things you said that reminded me. A couple of weeks ago, I had a conversation with a C-level executive from a big retail company, and she was saying that 3 2.5 or 3 years ago, they had the idea for rolling out curbside pickup. And she said, we were trying to figure out how much do you charge for that? How much would people be willing to pay for that convenience? And now, not a very long time after, that's sort of table stakes for every sort of company. So as you described those massive changes you went through, does anything stick out in your head as something that was particularly challenging to move the company through to get to where you needed to be?
Yeah, well, if I compare and contrast the two worlds in terms of the old world versus the new world, in the old world, and I think sometimes that we'll call it misunderstood by our customers at times, but we sold products, and the reality is the customer took that product and they brought it behind their firewall, and then they did something, they connected it with anything they wanted to, right? We were pretty agnostic as to how to use our technologies, so that by the time it came to a problem popping up in their infrastructure, and they called us, and the request was, hey, your product isn't working, and it was like, well, maybe, I mean, but we don't know what you did with it, what it's connected to, how all these relationships work, and so it was a little bit of a drawn out process to try to get to the root cause of these issues to really help customers out, and I think it created unnecessary friction oftentimes in the process, and if you now fast forward to this new world where you're talking about cloud services, the great thing about it is that Oracle picks all of the technologies in order to deliver this. So rather than you deciding, I want this application connected to this database, running on this operating system against this hardware platform, et cetera, it's like we deliver you a service that has all of that bundled together. So it actually creates more of a partnership relationship with our customer, where they sort of say, hey, we're going to turn over the keys to how we run financials, for instance. And as we'll say, great, we're gonna build this on what we believe to be the most secure, most scalable, most reliable platform in the world, but you won't even know or see any of that stuff. We're just going to deliver to you a great service. So we spent a lot of our energy as we thought through this, really thinking about the customer experience or their journey, and understanding that now it's not just that initial transaction. In fact, that's not how we measure our success. Success for Oracle today is really based around how our customers succeeding, and that's either through customer satisfaction type scores and feedback, or it's even simple things like, are they renewing the use of the technology? I mean, that's the greatest indicator of success. Booking a new opportunity with a customer is like the worst indicator, because that costs you a lot of money to get it all set up and delivered to the customer. And if you don't succeed with that, well, then you've spent a lot of money and haven't gotten much in return for it. But boy, if then they go and a couple of years later say, hey, this is working great, I'd like to renew it, expand it, that sort of idea, all of a sudden it's like things are working well. So getting our people and our business really aligned around those types of ideas have really been instrumental in again getting ourselves and our customers on the same side of the equation, rather than being in a position where maybe we're at odds as to what the right outcome is.
And Doug, it's a fascinating story about some of the changes within Oracle and the cultural change, technology change, business model change you had to go through. If you could step out of that a little, put yourself in sort of the minds of the customers, how have customers benefited from this ongoing and pretty extensive transformation that Oracle's undergone?
Yeah, well, I'll give you some easy examples, and then obviously talking to a customer themselves is the best indicator of that. But early on in our transformation activity, it was enlightening to see how far we had to come, which we have. But at the point we started it, it was, when you're in a service-based business, like if you walk into a Starbucks, ultimately you're acquiring a product, right? You're getting a coffee drink. But the reality is the entire service experience that Starbucks put together really defines whether it's successful for the customer or not. I mean, the latte itself is really just one small piece of it. You walk into a Starbucks and your drink isn't ready on the mobile app or what have you. Having that barista who walks up quickly and says, "Hey, I see you're standing there. What's your name? What did you order? Let me find it. Oh, gee, we don't have it. I'll make it right away." that entire relationship that you have from an employee perspective in terms of how they deliver the service really matters. And but that takes some time to change that. So early on, when I would talk to some of our leaders, I ask simple questions like, who do you think your customer is? And to me, every organization within at least within Oracle is servicing some customer. It doesn't necessarily mean the end customer, someone who's purchased it. And in fact, for things like contracting, you might have a team that's busy doing the contracting. They're servicing the salespeople because the salespeople are trying to service our, the end customers. And when there was a sort of blank stare at me, like, I don't have a customer. And it's like, well, gee, you do. Let's go through this a little more slowly. And then by the time you get done, they're like, oh, yeah. Okay, now I get it. Yeah, they're definitely my customer. Then my next natural question is, how often do you ask your customer, i.e. the salesperson, how you're doing? And I was like, we never do. And it's like, well, how are you ever going to be a service-oriented business if that's not the case? So it's a long way of just explaining that a lot of what we've rebuilt within Oracle is that culture of saying, how can I help? It's not the response of it's not my job. And really by doing that, we're only as strong as our weakest link. So it's always, transformation is a journey. It never ends on that front. It's never perfect all the time. But I think for the most part, what we really instilled in folks is, hey, when a customer is having an issue or they need help or whatever, you just jump in. Whoever you are, you jump in, even if it's not your job, you're not getting compensated for it, et cetera, because that's what's expected in a services-based business. And when we all do that, you'll get, your colleagues will help you in certain situations where you'd expect them to want to do the same for you. But ultimately, it's all about doing this to drive customer success and satisfaction. And if we just keep that in the front of our minds at all points in time, it all can work out. So getting back to your question, that's the type of thing where we see, certainly when we talk to customers, starting with culture as a concept of kind of rethinking that, and then it's just moving on to like business processes, which is like, hey, you can't just lift and shift the way you've always done business. You gave the example of of how to order at a retail. You just can't walk in and that happens automatically. You gotta kind of rethink, how does a customer want to interact? How quickly do you serve, do you get the order to the roadside, et cetera. And so we spent a lot of time looking at our business processes really under these guise of, hey, let's simplify these. So let's get rid of extraneous parts of the steps. Let's not complicate it. That only slows things down and decreases customer satisfaction. How do we empower the people and the activities that we're going so that we can make decisions and get things done rapidly at the point of contact? So it's not the used car sales manager. I got to always go back and ask whether I can do something on behalf of the customer. We don't want that either. And how do you delight it? How do you really create not just the interaction, but the actual software that we deliver to do it in a way that's really mobile oriented. That's focused on the here and now of what people expect out of technologies, not the old way where it's just simply transactional. But think about it from a decision-making process, from artificial intelligence, and then finally, what's the underlying systems to power that, which is gets back to the Oracle Cloud. And a great example of all this in action was for us, like internally at Oracle. I want my employees to be only focused on how to get out and deliver customer success. So everything they do internally around roadblocks for business process is just preventing them from doing that. So like, just take simple things like expense reimbursement, right? The idea that I have to go out and I go visit a customer, I incur an expense, I have to come back to my desktop, I got to bring it all up, I got to log into the system, I got to scan my receipts in, right? I got to compile it into something, I got to put it into the application, I got to submit it. That's a huge waste of time. How about we do this? Just take a picture of the receipt, interact with a chat bot. It'll ask you a couple clarifying questions and it'll submit it for you automatically, and you never have to go to the application, and you're done and you move on. Or if you're the manager, Like, you're the manager at Oracle or any organization. Do you know the hundreds, if not thousands, of rules that govern whether an expense can be reimbursed or not? Like, do you know what the spending threshold is at a dinner? Along with the fact that you can only have so many people. You can't do a public sector event and pay for a meal. I mean, all these different rules. How can we ever expect a manager to know all that? Yet, again, these older applications, they submit an expense and the manager has to look at it and figure out, is this okay to approve? How about we flip the script? Let's take the application and actually take all those business rules, put it into the logic. And then when it gets sent to the manager, it's already been pre-reviewed and it says to the manager, hey, this is okay to approve. Or, you know what, on line number 12, it violates an Oracle policy. What would you like to do? So now, instead of the manager trying to find the needle in the haystack, we point the needle out and they can quickly act and move on. Again, saves a tremendous amount of time, and it actually helps out with your compliance and other governance around your organization. So I know it's way too long an answer, but hopefully that helps.
No, I think there's the potential expanse of impact that can be had, whether it's expense reports, it's other things, in other parts of the business. I think that's a great example. And Doug, I also wanted to ask, the Oracle's own transformation, the way you engage differently with customers now. And it's also been fascinating over the last few years as your cloud business has grown so much to hear Oracle talking about, we have lots of companies now who are Oracle customers that never used Oracle products before. So from startups to mid-sized companies to maybe Oracle's traditional base of large enterprises, how has it been taking this new mindset to those different size, different culture companies?
Well, it's if you've never interacted with Oracle before, it's super easy because we have all of these new processes and ways of doing business that's all you interact and experience with. Those are it's super easy for us to execute on that. I think the harder are obviously customers and individuals who've had prior experiences with what we'll call the old Oracle, and in that instance, it's we have to go re-earn our right at the table, right? We have to go show that not only do we continue to have the best technology available, but we have the services and expectations to deliver on what they need, regardless of what the issue is, et cetera. So again, when I got back to you're only as strong as your weakest link. Again, we have to go re-earn some of those rights, but it's happening. It's happening in lots of different areas. But if I go back to kind of thinking about how to be highly disruptive and think in new ways that customers they don't even see it outright, but it's happening in the backgrounds. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, Safra gave me the organization called Oracle University. And Oracle University's historical mantra since the founding of the company was really to provide classroom training and education around our products. But in today's world, that's sort of not good enough. And by that, I mean, most people who are, first off, if you're in an application, the application should be intuitive. Like, it shouldn't require you to go off and have a bunch of classroom training in order to understand how to use ERP, HCM, CX, et cetera. So let's start with that as the basis. And the great thing is now I can take and work with the team at Oracle University to help point out where customer demand for training comes in, so that we can go back at the point of development and say, let's focus on making it easier, because then we've decreased the amount of interest in training on that front. Now go the next level, which is, hey, I'm actually in the application and I could use help now. The last thing I want to do is leave the application and go find training somewhere, whether I got to go to oracle.com or I got to sign up for a class or whatever. That's not when I need the help. That's the worst time of all. How about we just do the learning right at the point in which you need it? And so, a lot of what we've done at Oracle and rethinking that user experience is we call Oracle guided learning, which is putting that all in the hands of the user at the time they need, so that they can either hover over an icon that helps explain to them where they're at and what they can do next, or click immediately to bring up more in-depth help right inside the application. So that's the kind of disruptive behavior that Oracle is up to, that again, customers can't necessarily see it outright because it's sort of embedded into how we think, But that's the type of new age thinking that we're doing, that I think it emboldens us to to being that great partner for customers, whether you've been with us for 30 years or whether you're just showing up fresh.
Doug, one thing I wanted to ask about that, and I thought of it as, you were just describing that last part here about these changes, right? It's not that long ago that some of these practices, like what you described, Oracle University, I mean, that was it. That was accepted on both sides, but things are changing so fast now. So that notion of Oracle University to Oracle guided learning, it seems like this is relentless, right? Every part of the business has to accept this every day. What are we potentially falling behind on, and how do we get up in front and make sure we stay in lockstep with customers? That's a big challenge.
Yeah, and we're relentless at soliciting and taking feedback. And the feedback, might be as simple as, hey, it's I don't understand my bill, right? And that can take a form of lots of different ways to solve it. It can take the form in which case, hey, we're not presenting a unified view of the billing inquiries to a customer in a way that's easily understandable. It's too complex, whatever. So we're busily focused on trying to bring together a single customer's view of everything they use from Oracle, but not only just giving you billing, but usage, like how much of this are you using, how many users logged on last month. I mean, get into the depth of it so that it's not, a billing question is sort of can be a springboard to lots of different inquiries around how to make sure the customer is succeeding with it. And then of course, then it's also, let's make sure all the people that would touch a customer have the same information and are able to help a customer, because customer may not have that information right at their fingertips, but they call in and they need help with, again, I've got a billing question. Great, our accounts receivable group is there. They can quickly pull up that information. They can work with the customer around what's going on and how to solve it, but then empower them to go out and do it. So again, all kinds of different ways in which that, as you mentioned, the transformation is continuous, and I think that's been one of the benefits that we've had at Oracle is it started with a leadership that was very receptive to change. The fact that Larry and Safra Katz and Mark Hurd, when he was here, really embraced this idea of we need to do this, and you set out that leadership example, and everybody hears it, and it can help adopt it. And then after that, just having a relentless focus on continuously evaluating how you're doing and being honest with yourself. I mean, that as part of it is you might take the first turn of it. It's not quite right. It doesn't have the results you expect. Okay, let's go back and do it again. One of the earliest transformations at Oracle we did was, how do we contract with customers? How do we sell to them? And this getting back to that used car dealer type situation. The old way was a lot of heavy negotiations that took months on end, where there were no decision makers. Everybody was fighting. I mean, the procurement officers and legal teams. I mean, it was like a guaranteed lifetime business on that front. And as we thought about the company, that's the worst friction point. Like, we want our customers to get access to the cloud service as quickly as humanly possible. Anything that delays their access means they're not getting gratification. We're not helping them run their business. We're not helping them succeed. So as a result of it, we tried to think about, let's break down that contracting process. Let's figure out how to automate this so that customers can tell us what they want to purchase and under what conditions they want to do it. Let's make sure that the salespeople have the tools in order to make sure that it all can get put into the system and can send to the customer. They can look at it and DocuSign, get away from wet signatures, what have you, and get on with it so we can provision that system. We went from barely any automation to now over 90% of our contracts are now fully automated. They're completely touchless. They're not printed out. They're not touched. They're not manipulated, et cetera. The system, the configure price quote cloud takes care of all of that on behalf of our customers. That's disruptive.
And the people in the process, Doug, that used to be involved in all that, that 90% was manual, they can move on to these higher level things you've been describing.
That's exactly right. They move on to helping customers. So in many, and their customer is the salespeople, for instance, but they also get more in touch with the customers, and so as a result, they can spend more time, explaining what different things and terminologies mean, right? So again, I get back to this idea of, I don't want any of our back office folks who are helping to contract to have they're not allowed to just say no. Like, that's the worst thing that anybody could have, is like, you mean no, like it can never be done? You mean like no, like wait till the last day of the quarter and it's okay? Or no, like if we just change the following thing, it's, it'd be all right. So now it's all about service oriented. So a lot of it is like, your job is not to just say no, your job is to find a solution to the problem. So work with our salespeople, work with our customers, find the outcome that makes sense, and that way everybody walks away with their with their head held high and really happy to move into the relationship we're trying to get them into.
So Doug, you've given some, great wide-ranging examples of how the transformation has really helped Oracle succeed more with customers. Outside of that, what are some ways that you would say here today at the early days of 2022 that Oracle is differentiated in the marketplace to drive value for customers?
Yeah, so part of this also was trying to make sure that I saw it from the customer's perspective, and in fact, one of the organizations that is part of corporate operations is called our Strategic Clients Group, and this is a group of customers that have oftentimes have longstanding relationship with customers, but they're leaning into our business, and as a result of it, what the idea of reconfiguring this was, let's figure out how to provide them with more help, like not less help, but more help, because the more they're willing to bet their businesses on Oracle, the more service they should get, the more help and assistance along the way they should do. So we've really been leaning into that, and as part of that, it also helps me because then I get direct feedback from these customers about what they like and what they don't like, and a lot of this is, as we enter today, is pivoting around that. So, but getting back to your question, which is why do these really important customers want to do business with Oracle? What makes us unique? And so the way I would think about this is that Oracle, since its founding, has always been involved in helping solve organizations' most difficult problems. Whether that's helping ensure that a financial transaction, regardless of the currency or wherever in the world it goes through, or whether it's utility grids working with working to make sure the power's on and it's flowing, and regardless of where it is in the country, or it's life sciences and making sure that clinical trials are happening in a way that ensures that we can accelerate the pace to evaluate these in pandemics like COVID. So we always sort of been hovering around those areas and helping customers out. So as we moved to the cloud, I think we see ourselves in a similar vein. We're really the only vendor that has all of these technologies that we bring together. Applications, both horizontal and vertical or industry based, infrastructure with our own public cloud and obviously our database running on our hardware, et cetera. So we're the ultimate differentiators, the fact that all of these technologies work in complete harmony in a way that we can really drive maximum reliability, security, scalability, et cetera, that's really hard to find from others. And trust me, when we get to the type of workloads that some of these complex customers are doing, you need all of that, and to the T. And I think that's again where Oracle, I think, brings a lot of the differentiator, that we've got all these different technologies. We've seen these type of problems before. We know how to approach them to get them solved, and we can go ahead and do it in a unique way. And I think on top of that, one of the other last big changes, and again, I'm trying not to spill out all my guts here, but another group that after our former CEO Mark Hurd passed away, when Safra took all of the front office operations over as well, I really argued with her for that I help transform our strategic partners group. And by that, I mean, the global system integrators, the vast majority of all of the implementations of our software, even in the cloud, are aided with our partners. And whether that's Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, et cetera, PwC, those folks are on the front lines. And I think part of it was really figuring out, how do we embrace that? So, again, in the sort of before and after, before, when I would talk to folks, they'd be like, gosh, I can't believe it. The SI is calling and they've got all these SRs. It's like, I can't, let's not help them because we're just encouraging them to file more SRs. And I go, hold on a second. Wait, they're out there trying to make our cloud services successful. And our reaction is, let's not help them. Hey, let's do the opposite. Like, let's lean in even more to make sure they have an overwhelming amount of support. Because we can learn from what they experience, since they see it across many customers, so we can go back, build it in the factory to change it, or help expedite it for other customers that face the same situation, that sort of thing. Like, let's give them more help in the process, and I think that's really what we've been doing over the last year or so, and we've completely strengthened our relationship with those folks. So now, in any customer situation, I'd like to think that if they don't choose Oracle Consulting and they choose one of the system integrators, which often happens in most cases, now all of a sudden you've got a joint partnership that's going to, again, be focused on customer success, which is not just about buying the cloud service, but getting it implemented effectively and getting it up and running and succeeding with it.
Doug, I just want to follow up on that with a quick one, right? Because this notion of conventional wisdom, 4 or 5 years ago was saying, oh, the cloud's going to kill partner ecosystems, right? Because they don't need to integrate anymore. And the exact opposite has happened, right? The partners have been able to move up to these higher level types of engagements that you've described here. So again, I think it's one of those things where, as leaders, right, you've got to fight this notion of allowing things like let's not help them, to this notion of they're going to go away, when the reality of having that frontline communication with customers, with partners, is what gives you the real insight into what's going on in the market. So again, it sounds like all along the way, that's what you're helping to drive there. Shorten that distance between the customers and your company.
Yeah, I mean, I think you highlighted something really important, which is, it's not just then about the system integrators, but we've extended that to the entire ecosystem of partners, because you're right. Customers are ultimately, they have a framework of an environment. They have some things that they've had forever, and they have new things, and they're buying some new cloud services. Got to connect to old things, and it's never simple, right? IT by itself is a complex environment, and as a result, we can't anticipate and don't expect customers to pick Oracle's software for every usage. So not only do we have to integrate with all of these things, but we have to really embrace the idea that they want to work with multiple partners. And so that's, again, that's another example of a transformation we've been doing over the past year, is really building up our cloud ecosystem so that partners understand that they're welcome here, that we're not here to push them out of the way, or to say you can only use Oracle software, but more to say, what do you as a customer, what do you need in order to succeed? And if that means that that it's important that we work closely with XYZ vendor, we're going to work closely with XYZ vendor. And it is amazing how certainly over the last few months, it's just been a sea change that's going on, where we had to sort of pull teeth with some of these partners to get them to really get focused on going and running on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. All of our cloud applications run on OCI, so we know it works very effectively, et cetera. And a lot of it is for customers' benefit, want to have that ease of use out of a single cloud system. It was harder early on. Now they're actually calling us and they're saying, hey, I'm seeing customers are saying, gee, why aren't I on OCI? And they're like, how do I get on it? How do I partner, et cetera? And so really leaning into that and giving them a fast pathway to that, so they can be part of our ecosystem and part of the success.
Well, Doug, those are great insights, great perspectives on things, and it really gives, I think, a clear picture of what's going on here. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to offer you the last word, if there's anything you want to be sure to touch on.
Well, again, I appreciate the time. We love what your platform is doing and has been doing. And again, I just would ask everyone out there, if you haven't seen the new Oracle, please come on by. give me a shout or an email. I'm happy to tell you more about it. Or I think you'll see it throughout our entire employee organization, what's going on, and hopefully we can show you how we can help your own organization succeed with our technologies.
Well, great. Folks, thanks for being here with us. Doug Kehring, Executive Vice President of Corporate Operations at Oracle, talking about the incredible transformation the company's been through and the way it's imparting new levels of value for customers. Doug, thanks so much. Great conversation.
Thank you.